welcome back to another new edition of Windows and Current Affairs. And today we display an important and a thorny issue, something that has been put for debate for years and years here in Egypt. Our monuments and artifacts that are being put for a subject, or that are subject actually for international theft and for smuggling, and to be put in international auctions. It's a very important issue, and probably we haven't reached a definite solution to sort out this problem, and we're very delighted to raise it here in this edition of Windows and Current Affairs. And there is no better person to be able to talk to us about the danger of that particular issue on our history and our monuments and artifacts than Mr. Bassam Shammaa, the historian and author of Egyptology. Good evening, Mr. Shammaa. To our knowledge, I mean, it came in the news and the headlines and everywhere, and the media. You have raised fierce campaigns to be able to restore. We are going to talk in details later in this episode of Windows and Current Affairs about our stolen monuments, the monuments that are sent abroad to England and France, and even monuments are sent to Israel, smuggled to Israel. You have raised fierce and serious campaigns and collected signatures and petitions also to be able to restore those monuments. And as a result, to your serious calls and repeated calls in the media and everywhere, you have received a generous invitation from the president to hold an urgent meeting with a consultant there, a consultant of national security, Ambassador Faiza Abu Naga. She has heard your calls and called you to come over to the office and to try to seek a solution together to be able to sort out problems like that. You have delivered a file, the file of our monuments and artifacts subject for international. You have raised the dangers of selling those artifacts and monuments on the internet and international auctions. Tell us exactly the story. What happened?
Well, I think 2015 is a year, it's a very interesting year, because it's a year of seeing the fruits
You've been doing that for
all
years.
your
How long have you been doing
Oh dear, we're telling my age now. We're talking over a good 20 years or something.
No, raising campaigns like that?
Oh, all the time, all the time.
So this has been going on for
campaigns
20
to
years?
regain our monuments, campaigns to educate people about our monuments here and abroad, written booklets about our monuments in the museums abroad for the Egyptians to know exactly what is there and why am I asking for those particular pieces to come back. There was a particular campaign that I remember called the 5 Big Ones.
5 big ones.
The 5 big ones. And I'm not
When
talking
was
here.
that campaign?
That campaign about, I would say, 3 or 4 years ago, something like that. And now it's included. They are like daughters and sons in one family. So I took the 5 big ones and I took aside the latest campaign of the 20 million signatures. This is how it's called. The campaign is called,
So you
titled
raised 20 million signatures.
million. That's a very ambitious campaign that started only about 1 month ago. So I took the 5 big ones and I went in, because the 5 big ones had over 20,000 and something participants. So if you can think that over 20,000 Egyptians participated to ask the world, bring us back 5 monuments, then you should be so optimistic that if we are talking about a huge international campaign like the 20 million signatures, now we are talking about regaining more than the 5 big ones. Now, the 5 big ones are not big in size, because in history, size doesn't matter. I can have a huge pyramid, but I didn't have one piece of news about the king, for example. The King Khufu's pyramid, for example. It's a beautiful artifact, beautiful piece of art, beautiful piece of geometry, trigonometry, all sorts of how the Egyptians did it. But is it telling me anything about Khufu himself? Is it telling me how many years he ruled? Is it telling me any information?
You mean
no.
the inscriptions on
Exactly.
the walls?
Until now,
But
no.
you mean it's not as important as the Rosetta Stone, for example?
If you're talking about the info of this person or that person or that king or how many years, if you're interested in such things,
That's interesting,
if obviously
yes.
if you're interested in geometry, then of course it wins directly without saying. So size isn't everything in history. So when I'm including in the 5 big ones a coin, so they're going to tell me you leave all the monuments of Egypt outside Egypt and you're asking for a coin. I tell you yes. Coins are everywhere, here in Egypt and outside Egypt. I tell you, no, this particular coin I wanted. It's in the British Museum, and it is depicting Cleopatra or Cleopatra the Seventh. And she is there in this particular coin. She's not beautiful at all. So why on earth would you like to regain a coin that shows Cleopatra the Seventh ugly? You can
That's
ask a question.
Right.
Because only this coin will regain the dignity of Cleopatra the Seventh. This is the answer for all the Hollywood movies which were made about this queen, showing her as Elizabeth. We all love Elizabeth Taylor. She's gorgeous, right? Or Vivian Leigh. She's another gorgeous lady. But definitely Cleopatra the Seventh didn't use her physique and didn't use her beauty and didn't use her facial features and her beautiful purple eyes to convince Julius Caesar to do this or to convince Marcus Antonius to do this. She used this. She used her brain. But most of the people now are writing about Cleopatra being gorgeous. That's not dignified to her character.
She's a symbol of beauty.
And she's the symbol of beauty. Well, she's not. The truth is, she was not beautiful at all. And this coin proves it. So, if Cleopatra came out from her tomb now, enter this studio, she's going to shake hands with me. She's going to definitely fall in love with me. And I will tell you why. Because I was the guy who said, she did not use her beauty. She used her brains. She was a politician. She studied poems. She was a knight. She knows her deals with the horses. She was a chemist.
She was a chemist.
Yes, she knew about chemistry. And she studied all sorts of very complicated, difficult mythology. To study mythology is pretty difficult. She's the only Ptolemaic ruler out of 14 to 15 Ptolemaic rulers who spoke and talked Egyptian language. All other Ptolemies didn't talk Egyptian. Ptolemy the First, the founder of the Ptolemaic dynasty, did not speak Egyptian. Ptolemy the Second, Ptolemaeus the Third, the people who are involved in the building of the library, the Bibliotheca Alexandrina with its 700,000 manuscripts, didn't talk Egyptian. But she did. So definitely we need to rewrite the history of this lady. And in order to rewrite the history of Cleopatra the Seventh, then we need that coin to be in Egypt. So see how in the last 5 minutes I'm describing to you a whole new chapter of our Egyptian history through one coin now in the British Museum.
One coin would relate a whole century. Right. In your important meeting at the presidential office, meeting Councillor Abu Naga, you offered the solution or an exit for the problem of Sekhemka, the statue of Sekhemka. Show them colored pictures, photos of the amount of negligence and the garbage and rubbish and the different thefts that were taken at the most important Islamic artifacts, the places, monuments, Islamic monuments, places where they are exhibited. And you even delivered 2 flash cards to be able to taken as evidence for those thefts. The address of the auctions, the international auctions,
exactly.
the accounts, international accounts for those auctions. What happened?
Okay, names of
What did it
auction
come up
markets, the result. Before the result, I will tell you that I gave addresses of people in the United States England, and the occupied land of Palestine, and other places. But why am I going with those three places? Because there, the biggest names of auction markets is having the time of their life, and they are smiling all the way to the bank. You have Christie's, you have Sotheby's. And in the United States, when I studied the rules there, I found that those people who are selling our monuments, they are doing something legal, according to the article of education, an article of, there is an article in the American law, the cultural article, which is allowing you to sell the monuments if it entered before 1970, before the agreement of the UNESCO. But of course, when you say that, you are giving those guys the best time of their life to escape any type of, come here, show me, when did you get this statue into it or into England? Well, of course, they're going to tell you before 1970, of course, because you gave them the answer for their problem. The biggest problem is, when did you get this statue in? Well, of course, it's going to tell you before 1970. Why? Because if you said after 1970, come, we are going to tell you that the UNESCO is saying so and so and so in the agreement. Now, that's number one. Number two, very crucial that everybody knows this coming piece of information. There are two agreements of the UNESCO. One, which we all know about, 1970, 190-something countries signed. Okay, including the including the Zionist state, which is the so-called Israel. They actually signed, and we signed in the days of Sadat. We signed on the UNESCO agreement, 1973. Okay, fine. There is another agreement that you don't hear a lot about, called the agreement of illicit, which is monuments to be sold illegally in a country or a nation. Now, countries, including Egypt, signed. You cannot sell monuments in this country. Now, who didn't sign? Well, of course, we can all say it in one sentence: the Zionist state known as the State of Israel. They did not sign. And by this, I, with my own eyes, December 2013, and I delivered those pictures, took pictures with my own camera in the occupied Quds al-Sharif of shops selling Egyptian monuments on shopping windows. You are walking down the street, you are buying a jacket, you are buying a T-shirt.
Is it original?
Yes, and they give you a certificate of authenticity.
But maybe it's fake and they give you the certificate.
They get the certificate. Where did you get those guys? We got it from Europe. When you talk to them, they tell you, we got those statues and those from Europe.
And who issued the certificate?
The European auction markets give you that.
So it's authenticated.
Yeah. And with something called the preference. Preference is like the family tree of where it went to. So this statue went to the family of I don't know who, and then family of Margaret took it and then sold it to the museum, and then the museum sold.
Completely legalizing.
Oh yes, and you can. Sekhemka. How did you know that Sekhemka came out 1849?
Because we would like to hear the story,
well,
the full
okay.
story
It's
of
an
Sekhemka,
amazing.
and what did it end up to?
Okay, it's why is it this Sekhemka became the most famous statue, probably more famous than Tutankhamun. In certain time.
But we Egyptians are familiar with Tutankhamun much more.
Yes, and the world. But Sekhemka is an amazingly preserved statue. And you are talking to a guy who's been looking at statues for 34 years. So when I tell you amazing like that, with that passion, now you can understand how beautiful this statue is. Number one. Number two, it's a good 4,300 years ago. So it's Old Kingdom. So it's the kingdom of the pyramids. So whenever you mention that, its price is sky high to the people who are going to buy. Three, it is intact as if it was carved yesterday. There is not one scratch in the statue. Now, why am I saying this? Because I'm saying that when it went out of Egypt all the way to Britain, and then from Britain to the Museum of Northampton, and then Museum of Northampton decided in an amazing case that will be written in history, this case of a museum selling a statue. A museum. We lived and we witnessed a museum selling. No, it's 75 centimeters high. But as I told you at the beginning, size isn't everything in antiquities.
I mean, it's easily
yes, it is easily maneuvered. But that is not an obstacle for them, because obelisks were sent out of Egypt.
Right. And
in Rome alone, in Paris there is one, and in Rome there are more than 11 or 12.
11?
Oh yes, in the squares. Piazza del Popolo, I've got the most exquisite obelisk, and so on and so forth. And here is another story. I applied somewhat 15, 20 years to go to ask the Italians to bring us back our obelisks. And I remember in those days I was a young tour guide, and there was a couple of sentences in one of our magazines. An Egyptian young, I don't know, researcher in Egyptology wants to bring back, he's going to be heading to. And I went, and they didn't give me the visa here, the Italian consulate. So I was refused to go. And on the passport was not a refuse like we know the refuse. It was a huge red rectangle that big.
Was it justified?
Oh, they say not to be given the visa for an untold reasons in Italian.
Very straightforward.
Thank you. So Sekhemka, back again to this guy, went out with a Marquis of Northampton, is that? And he's the Marquis II.